You speak when I tell you to speak, and right now you are to remain silent." Judge Oliver Grant's gavel cracked like a gunshot, echoing through the suffocating courtroom. "Another word, and I'll throw you in a holding cell for contempt. Do you understand me?" Vanessa King stared back, her expression an impenetrable mask of absolute calm. She didn't flinch. She didn't cower. She simply adjusted the collar of her unassuming beige trench coat. "I understand perfectly, Your Honor," she said softly, a dangerous edge to her voice. "More than you could possibly know." The morning rain in Manhattan drummed a relentless rhythmic beat against the pavement of Foley Square. To most, it was just another dreary Tuesday in New York City. To Vanessa King, it was an opportunity. Vanessa was a woman who moved through the world with the kind of calculated precision that only came from decades of having to prove herself twice as capable to get half the respect. At 48, she had shattered every glass ceiling the legal world had tried to place above her. Just 3 weeks prior, she had been elected president of the New York State Bar Association, the first black woman to hold the position in its history. But today, she was not the president of the NYSBA. Today, she was just a citizen with a minor traffic citation. Vanessa stood before her bedroom mirror, deliberately shedding the armor of her elite profession. Gone was the tailored Armani suit, the subtle but expensive pearls, the designer briefcase that signaled authority the moment she walked into a boardroom. Instead, she pulled on a faded, oversized grey wool sweater, a pair of dark denim jeans, and sensible scuffed loafers. She pulled her hair back into a simple, unstyled bun. She looked ordinary. She looked invisible. And that was exactly the point. The citation was trivial. A ticket for an alleged illegal U-turn on an empty street late at night, written by an overzealous rookie cop. Vanessa's high-powered assistants had offered to make a single phone call and have it quietly dismissed. That was how the system worked for the elite. But Vanessa had declined. As the newly minted leader of the state's legal profession, she had pledged to investigate the systemic inequalities in municipal courts, the entry-level justice system where everyday citizens were processed like cattle. She wanted to see the machine from the inside, stripped of her titles and privileges. "Are you sure you want to do this, Ms. King?" her chief of staff, David, had asked on the phone that morning. "Judge Grant has a reputation. He's notorious in the lower courts. He thinks he's a supreme being. He has the highest rate of maximum fines in the district." "That is precisely why I'm going, David," Vanessa had replied, her voice cool and steady. "I need to see what the people see. I need to feel what they feel." Stepping out of her luxury high-rise, Vanessa bypassed her private driver and walked to the subway. She rode the crowded, rattling 4 train down to the financial district, absorbing the exhausted faces of the working-class New Yorkers around her. These were the people the law was supposed to protect, yet so often it was the weapon used to keep them marginalized. When she arrived at the imposing limestone facade of the municipal courthouse, the air inside was thick with anxiety and the smell of cheap coffee. The metal detectors buzzed incessantly. Guards barked orders. It was an environment designed to intimidate, to make the individual feel small and powerless before the vast machinery of the state. Vanessa took her assigned seat in the back row of courtroom 3B. The wooden benches were hard, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered with a maddening buzz, and the walls were panelled in cheap, faux oak veneer. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. She was no longer Vanessa King, formidable litigator and Bar Association president. In this room she was just a black woman in a plain sweater, a number on a docket. And she was about to meet the king of this petty kingdom. The heavy wooden doors flanking the judge's bench swung open, and the bailiff's voice boomed over the restless murmur of the crowd. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Oliver Grant presiding. Court is now in session." Judge Oliver Grant swept into the room like a dark cloud. He was a man in his late 50s, with a receding hairline, a permanently florid complexion, and the rigid, puffed-out chest of a man desperate to project authority. Grant had been a mediocre lawyer who had leveraged political favors to secure a municipal bench seat. For 15 years, he had festered in this lower court, passed over for promotions to the state Supreme Court or federal benches, due to his abrasive temperament and consistently overturned rulings. To compensate for his profound professional insecurities, He ruled courtroom 3B like a tyrannical emperor. Vanessa watched him take his seat. He didn't look at the courtroom. He looked down at his docket, his expression one of supreme annoyance, as if the mere existence of the people in the gallery was an insult to his valuable time. "Let's get this over with," Grant muttered into his microphone, not bothering to hide his disdain. "Call the first case." For the next 2 hours, Vanessa sat in silence, observing a masterclass in judicial misconduct. Grant was a bully. He interrupted defendants, rolled his eyes at their explanations, and handed out maximum fines with a flick of his wrist. Vanessa's blood began to simmer as she watched a young Hispanic mother holding a crying toddler try to explain that she had missed her previous court date because she was in the emergency room. "I don't care about your sob stories, Ms. Rodriguez," Grant snapped, leaning over the bench. "The law requires attendance. You failed to appear. That's an automatic failure to appear charge, an additional $500 fine, and your license is suspended." "But, Your Honor, I need to drive to work, or I'll lose my job," the woman pleaded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I brought the hospital records." "Did I ask for your life story?" Grant interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "Pay the fine with the clerk. Next case." Vanessa felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. This was the reality of the justice system for the vulnerable. Grant wasn't administering justice. He was extracting revenue and feeding his own ego by crushing people who didn't have the resources to fight back. He relied on the fact that these people couldn't afford lawyers, didn't know their rights, and were too terrified to appeal. She took a small leather-bound notebook from her purse and began to jot down short, precise notes. Failure to review evidentiary documents. Hostile demeanor. Disproportionate sentencing. These weren't just observations. They were the foundation of a formal ethics complaint. As the morning dragged on, Vanessa noticed a distinct pattern. Grant was noticeably harsher, more dismissive, and quicker to anger when dealing with people of color. He spoke to white defendants with a modicum of gruff patience, but his tone shifted to outright hostility when addressing black and brown citizens. He was operating on unchecked, blatant prejudice. Finally, the clerk called the name. "Docket number 4409, City of New York versus Vanessa King." Vanessa closed her notebook, slipped it back into her purse, and stood up. She smoothed the wrinkles out of her faded sweater and walked down the center aisle. She stopped at the defendant's podium, standing tall, her posture impeccable despite the casual clothing. She looked up at the man sitting high above her on his wooden throne. The trap was set. The bait was in the water. Judge Grant didn't look up as Vanessa approached the podium. He was busy scratching something onto a notepad. "Vanessa King. Illegal U-turn. Do you have a lawyer, or are you representing yourself, which I highly advise against given the general incompetence I see in this room?" "I am representing myself, Your Honor," Vanessa said. Her voice was calm, perfectly modulated, and carried effortlessly across the silent courtroom. Grant finally glanced up. His eyes quickly scanned her. The plain sweater, the unstyled hair, the lack of a briefcase or designer labels. In an instant, his internal biases categorized her. Uneducated, low income, easily intimidated. "Fine, how do you plead?" Grant sighed, leaning back in his leather chair and steepling his fingers. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Vanessa replied. "And I would like to file a motion to dismiss based on the fact that the officer's citation lacks the required statutory specificity under the New York Vehicle and Traffic Law section." "Stop right there," Grant barked, slamming his hand flat on the desk. "I don't need a legally confused civilian coming in here trying to quote statutes she Googled last night. You made an illegal turn. The officer saw you." "With respect, Your Honor," Vanessa continued, her tone remaining impeccably polite but firm. "The officer's narrative does not indicate that the turn impeded traffic, which is a required element of the specific violation cited. Furthermore, I have dashcam footage proving the street was completely empty." Grant's face turned a shade of mottled crimson. He despised being corrected, and he especially despised being corrected by someone he deemed beneath him. "I said stop talking. You do not argue with me in my courtroom. You do not come in here in your casual attire and tell me how the law works." "I am simply asserting my right to a defense, Your Honor," Vanessa said. "If you will permit me to submit the video evidence to the clerk." "You speak when I tell you to speak, and right now you are to remain silent." Grant's gavel cracked like a gunshot, echoing through the suffocating courtroom. "Another word, and I'll throw you in a holding cell for contempt. Do you understand me?" Vanessa stared back, her expression an impenetrable mask of absolute calm. She didn't flinch. She didn't cower. "I understand perfectly, Your Honor," she said softly, a dangerous edge to her voice. "More than you could possibly know." "Oh, you think you're smart?" Grant sneered, leaning over the bench, his voice dripping with malice. "You think you can play lawyer? Let me show you how the law actually works. I find you guilty. I am imposing the maximum fine of $300 for the traffic violation, and since you want to be insolent and disrespect this court, I am citing you for civil contempt. That's another $500. $800 total, payable immediately, or you don't leave this building." A shocked murmur rippled through the gallery. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. $800 for a disputed U-turn was extortionate. "Your Honor," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register, "I formally object to the contempt charge. I have not raised my voice, used profanity, or disrupted proceedings. I have merely stated my defense. By denying me the opportunity to present exculpatory evidence, you are violating my right to due process." Grant's eyes went wide with fury. "Are you deaf? I told you to shut your mouth. I am the law in this room. Bailiff, take her into custody until she can pay the fine." "That won't be necessary," Vanessa said smoothly, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a sleek black titanium American Express Centurion card and placed it softly on the wooden podium. "I will pay the fines in full, immediately." Grant blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by the sight of the exclusive card, but his arrogance quickly smothered his confusion. "Pay the clerk, and get out of my sight." Vanessa walked over to the clerk's desk, her face entirely impassive. The young clerk, a woman who looked terrified of Grant, processed the payment with trembling hands. "I need a receipt," Vanessa told the clerk, her voice gentle, completely contrasting the iron will she had just displayed to the judge. "A fully itemized receipt, including the specific charge codes for both the traffic violation and the contempt citation." "Yes, ma'am," the clerk whispered, handing over the printed document. "And one more thing," Vanessa said, raising her voice just enough so it would be picked up by the court reporter's microphone. "I would like to formally request the official, certified transcript of this entire exchange. Can you please confirm that the court reporter has captured every word spoken by Judge Grant?" The court reporter, an older man sitting by his stenograph machine, looked up, surprised, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. Grant heard her. "You want a transcript?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Go ahead. Waste more of your money. Maybe you can read it in your free time and learn how to show respect to a judge. You're dismissed." Vanessa folded the receipt, slid it into her purse, and turned to look at Oliver Grant one last time. She didn't glare. She didn't look angry. She looked at him with the cold, analytical gaze of a predator observing prey that had just confidently walked into a cage and locked the door from the inside. "Enjoy the rest of your day on the bench, Judge Grant," Vanessa said quietly. She turned and walked out of the heavy wooden doors. The moment the doors clicked shut behind her, the charade dropped. Vanessa King pulled out her smartphone. She dialed a number she knew by heart. "David," she said, her voice now back to its usual commanding cadence. "I need you to contact the court stenographer for Manhattan Municipal Court, Part 3B. I need the certified transcript of my hearing expedited and delivered to my office by tomorrow morning." "Did he do it, Vanessa?" David asked over the line. "Did he step out of line?" "He didn't just step out of line, David," Vanessa said, stepping out of the courthouse and into the brisk New York air, signaling for a waiting black luxury SUV that had just pulled up. "He leapt over it, set it on fire and danced on the ashes. He hit me with maximum fines, denied me due process, and threw a contempt charge at me because I politely cited a statute." "Good Lord," David breathed. "He really has no idea who you are." "None," Vanessa said, sliding into the plush leather back seat of the SUV. I want a full dossier on every complaint filed against Judge Oliver Grant over the last 10 years. Every overturned ruling, every grievance from legal aid attorneys, everything. We are going to build an ethics case so watertight it would survive a nuclear blast." "And the grand finale?" David asked, a hint of excitement in his voice. "The New York State Bar Association's annual Judicial Ethics Gala is in exactly 3 weeks, Vanessa replied, a slow, dangerous smile finally spreading across her face. "Judge Grant has been aggressively lobbying for an invitation because he wants an appellate seat. Make sure he gets a VIP ticket. Put him right near the front." 3 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan was a sea of glittering chandeliers, black tuxedos, and silk evening gowns. The annual Judicial Ethics Gala was the most prestigious event on the New York legal calendar. It was a night where state Supreme Court justices, federal judges, elite partners from top-tier law firms, and powerful politicians mingled, drank expensive champagne, and decided the future of the state's judiciary over prime rib. Judge Oliver Grant was in his element. He had purchased a new, overly expensive tuxedo for the occasion. He had spent the first 2 hours of the evening aggressively schmoozing, laughing too loudly at jokes told by appellate judges, and handing out his embossed business cards to anyone who made eye contact. He was desperate to escape the municipal courts. He wanted the prestige, the power, and the salary of a higher court. "Yes, well, you know how it is in the lower courts," Grant was saying, swirling a glass of scotch as he cornered a highly respected federal circuit judge. "You have to maintain an iron fist. The general public, they come in completely ignorant of the law. You have to put them in their place quickly, or it's absolute chaos. It's a burden, really, but someone has to uphold the dignity of the law." The federal judge offered a tight, non-committal smile and politely excused himself. Grant didn't notice the brush-off. His ego was too inflated. He turned toward the open bar to get another drink when his eyes caught a glimpse of a woman standing near the VIP curtain. Grant froze. He blinked, unsure if the expensive scotch was playing tricks on his mind. It was the woman from his courtroom. The black woman in the faded sweater he had held in contempt, but she looked entirely different. She was wearing a breathtaking, floor-length emerald green gown that looked custom-tailored. Diamonds glittered discreetly at her ears and throat. She was surrounded by a small entourage of people, including the district attorney and a state senator, who were hanging onto her every word, laughing at something she had just said. Grant's face flushed with immediate anger. How did she get in here? He thought. This is an exclusive event. Tickets are thousands of dollars. Did she sneak in as catering staff and steal a dress? His arrogance blinded him to any logical conclusion. He set his drink down on a passing waiter's tray and marched straight toward her, his chest puffed out. This was his territory. This was the elite legal world, and she had no business polluting it. "Excuse me," Grant said loudly, interrupting the district attorney mid-sentence. He glared at Vanessa. "I know you. You were in my courtroom." Vanessa turned slowly. The district attorney and the state senator stopped talking, looking at Grant with a mixture of confusion and mild annoyance. Vanessa's expression remained perfectly serene. "Yes, Judge Grant. I was in your courtroom 3 weeks ago." "What are you doing here?" Grant demanded, his voice rising, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "This is a private, highly secured event for legal professionals. You can't just crash a gala because you bought a fancy dress with the money you probably owe the city. I am going to call security and have you escorted out immediately." The silence that fell over their small circle was deafening. The district attorney's jaw literally dropped. The state senator looked at Grant as if he had just sprouted a second head. Vanessa didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her sparkling water. "I assure you, Judge Grant, I was invited." "Bullshit," Grant spat, losing whatever thin veneer of professionalism he had. "You're a petty traffic offender who doesn't know her place. Security!" He raised his hand, waving wildly toward a guard near the entrance. Before the guard could move, the ballroom lights dimmed. A booming voice echoed over the state-of-the-art sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The evening's program is about to begin." Vanessa handed her glass to a waiter. She looked at Grant, a spark of cold fire in her eyes. "You should find your seat, Judge Grant. You really don't want to miss the keynote speech." Grant scoffed. "I'm not done with you." "Oh, I know," Vanessa whispered. but I am about to be done with you." She turned and walked away, not toward the exit, but toward the velvet-roped backstage area leading to the main podium. Grant fumed as he made his way to his table, table 4, right near the front. He sat down, his face red, ignoring the confused looks of his tablemates. He would find security the moment the speeches were over. He would have that woman thrown out onto Fifth Avenue. Up on the massive stage, the outgoing chairman of the Bar Association stepped to the microphone. "Welcome, distinguished guests, to the annual Judicial Ethics Gala," the chairman began. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate the integrity of our legal system. And to lead us into a new era of accountability and excellence, it is my absolute honor to introduce our keynote speaker. She is a powerhouse litigator, a champion of civil rights, and 3 weeks ago, she made history. Please welcome the newly elected president of the New York State Bar Association, Ms. Vanessa King." The ballroom erupted into thunderous standing applause. At table 4, Oliver Grant's heart simply stopped. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. His breath caught in his throat. "No!" his brain screamed. "No! It's a coincidence. A name." But as the velvet curtains parted, and the woman in the emerald green gown walked out into the spotlight, Grant's entire world collapsed. It was her, the woman he had bullied, the woman he had silenced, the woman he had illegally fined for contempt. Vanessa King stepped up to the podium. She waited for the applause to die down, looking out over the sea of faces. Her eyes scanned the front tables until they locked onto Oliver Grant. He was pale, sweating profusely, gripping the edge of the table as if the floor was dropping out from under him. Vanessa smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. "Thank you," Vanessa began, her voice resonating with power and authority. "We are here tonight to talk about ethics. We love to talk about the grand ideals of justice, but justice isn't measured in the Supreme Court. It is measured in the lowest municipal courts, where everyday citizens first meet the law. It is measured when vulnerable people, without money or influence, stand before a judge." She paused, the ballroom hanging on her every word. 3 weeks ago," Vanessa continued, her eyes never leaving Grant, "I decided to conduct an experiment. I dressed in plain clothes. I left my title at the door. I walked into a municipal courtroom in this city to contest a minor, unjust traffic citation. I wanted to see what happens to a regular citizen who tries to respectfully assert their rights." A murmur of intrigue washed over the crowd. Vanessa reached under the podium and pulled out a bound document. "I have here the certified transcript of that hearing. Allow me to read a quote from the presiding judge, spoken to a citizen who was merely trying to submit exculpatory evidence." She opened the transcript. "You speak when I tell you to speak, and right now you are to remain silent," Vanessa read, perfectly mimicking Grant's aggressive, barking tone. "Another word, and I'll throw you in a holding cell for contempt. I am the law in this room." Gasps echoed through the room. Federal judges frowned. Appellate justices whispered to one another in shock. "When I calmly informed this judge that he was violating my right to due process," Vanessa said, her voice rising in power, "he slapped me with a $500 contempt fine simply because I did not cower. He assumed I was uneducated. He assumed I was poor. He assumed I was powerless. He assumed I was someone he could abuse without consequence." Vanessa closed the transcript with a loud thwack that echoed like a gavel strike. "He was wrong." She pointed directly at Oliver Grant. The spotlight seemed to shift, catching Grant in his chair. 700 of the most powerful legal minds in the state turned to look at him. "That judge," Vanessa declared, her voice ringing with righteous fury, "is Oliver Grant, and he is sitting at table 4. Grant tried to stand, tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He looked like a fish suffocating on dry land. The federal judge he had been schmoozing earlier physically leaned away from him in disgust. "The State Bar Association does not merely write strongly worded letters," Vanessa concluded, her tone lethal. "Effective immediately, my office has submitted this transcript, along with a 50-page dossier detailing a decade of Judge Grant's discriminatory, abusive, and unconstitutional behavior, to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, demanding his immediate removal from the bench. We will not tolerate petty tyrants wearing the robes of justice. Thank you, and enjoy your evening." The ballroom erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar of approval mixed with absolute shock. Oliver Grant didn't wait for dessert. He stumbled out of his chair and practically ran for the exit, his expensive new tuxedo suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. But he couldn't outrun the karma that had just violently caught up to him. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. Vanessa King didn't just file a complaint. She brought the full, crushing weight of the legal establishment down on Oliver Grant. The media got hold of the story, the arrogant judge who unwittingly threw the book at the president of the Bar Association. It was front-page news. "The Fool in Robes," read the headline of the New York Post. Within 48 hours, the State Commission on Judicial Conduct suspended Grant without pay, pending an emergency hearing. When the hearing convened, Grant tried to hire a high-powered defense attorney, but no one in the city would touch his case. They all wanted to stay in Vanessa King's good graces. Grant was forced to represent himself, the ultimate bitter irony. The hearing was a massacre. Vanessa didn't just bring her transcript. She brought David, who had coordinated testimony from dozens of victims Grant had abused over the years. The Hispanic mother, Ms. Rodriguez, testified about how Grant had mocked her hospital records. Young black men testified about the exorbitant bails Grant had set for minor infractions. Grant sat at the defense table, grey and shrunken, looking like a deflated balloon. The arrogance that had fueled him for 15 years was entirely gone, replaced by the terrifying realization that he was ruined. The commission didn't just remove Oliver Grant from the bench. Because of the blatant constitutional violations proven in his rulings, they recommended him for disbarment. A month later, the appellate division stripped him of his license to practice law entirely. His judicial pension was heavily penalized. The man who had built his entire identity on demanding unquestioning obedience from the vulnerable was now a disgraced, unemployed former lawyer who couldn't even legally advise someone on a parking ticket. Months later, Vanessa King sat in her expansive corner office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. She was reviewing a new piece of legislation she had helped draft, a sweeping reform bill mandating regular independent audits of municipal courtroom proceedings to prevent judges like Grant from operating in the shadows. Her phone buzzed. It was David. "Vanessa, I just got an update on our old friend Oliver Grant," David said, a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. "He just filed for personal bankruptcy. He's been trying to get a job teaching paralegal courses at a community college, but they revoked the offer when they ran a background check." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, looking out at the city below. She didn't feel joy at his ruin, but she felt a profound sense of justice. Grant had spent a lifetime destroying people's lives with the careless swing of a gavel. The universe had simply allowed him to swing that gavel at the one person who could hit back harder. "Let that be a lesson to the rest of them, David," Vanessa said softly. "The robes don't make you a king. They make you a servant. And if you forget that, the people you serve will eventually remind you." She hung up the phone, picked up her pen, and went back to work. There was still a lot of justice left to serve. What an incredible story of absolute karma. Vanessa King proved that true power isn't about throwing your weight around. It's about holding the corrupt accountable. Judge Oliver Grant thought he was an untouchable king in his little courtroom, but he messed with the absolute wrong woman and lost his career, his license, and his pride in the blink of an eye. If you loved watching this arrogant judge get exactly what he deserved, and seeing Vanessa serve pure, unadulterated justice, please smash that like button right now. It really helps the channel. Share this video with anyone who loves a satisfying story of karma hitting